Oh, he's and I'm telling you something. He had turned 75 on The Irishman, and the guy ran circles around everybody. I mean,
wow.
they had a lot of 20-year-old PAs and everything. This guy is amazing. The energy and the vitality that he has at his age. I mean, he could go until he's 120 years old if he wanted to. That's how much energy this guy has.
Because I remember asking you yesterday about whether you noticed any change with Scorsese's style from Casino or to The Irishman. Has he mellowed in any way, or does he get the best out of his actors in a certain different way? But you were just like, he's just so sharp, just that energy is constantly there. It was the same as Casino and same with The Irishman, which is insane given his age.
Absolutely. I mean, it seemed like that time capsule, that time frame, 20 some odd years, he never changed. It's like he had the same zest and the same energy level that he did on Casino. The only thing different that I noticed was obviously in the storytelling about the characters and how a little bit more internalized, and how that characterization of what Frank Sheeran was feeling and going through at that age, and more reflective, less quick pacing, like in his, like in Casino or Goodfellas. I mean, the pacing was completely slowed down, for that type of story.
Yeah, it was a very slow paced film. We talked a lot about what we thought of the film as well, didn't we? I mean,
yes.
there was some improvements, and we both know what we're talking about. We both know which scene we're talking about. We both knew which one it was before the other had even said it. The people who are listening to this, they will know. Because
right.
Whenever anybody criticizes The Irishman, they always bring up that scene of De Niro stomping the grocer. It's just,
right.
I mean, no disrespect, but it's just so poor, so poor. There's no way to rationalize. I always wish that there's some kind of interview with Scorsese or something where he kind of goes through his reasoning for shooting it that way, because it just looks so poor. The guy screaming for no reason, the glass smashes for no reason. De Niro looks like an old man. And something I mentioned when we were talking before was that at this point in the movie, because it's so early, you as an audience member already know that you're watching a 70-year-old man play someone who's in his maybe late 30s or 40s at that period. And you're constantly scrutinizing the de-aging effects. You're looking at how the guy moves and everything. So you shoot yourself in the foot by having a scene like that early in the movie. And I mean, to me, it's not on De Niro because, I mean, like we said the other day, he's a very fit man, he's a very strong man. He lifted up Zac Efron for a promotional shoot, which was only done a few years ago. He clearly could have filmed that differently. I mean, maybe not like he did when he was in Goodfellas and that beatdown with the Billy Bats beatdown, but he clearly could have done that differently. But I just think it was filmed poorly. You don't even need to show the scene. Maybe show Peggy Sheeran's just reaction. Let us imagine the horror of what her father is doing, or use a close-up or a body double or whatever. But it was such a poor scene, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. And I remember telling you about the fact that I took somebody with me to see the film because I managed to see it before it came out on Netflix. I was one of the privileged few in the UK that was able to do so. I took someone who kind of watches these superhero films, doesn't really watch these gangster movies, grown-up films, and I said to him, listen, come with me, and I'm going to show you a real movie. And I was sitting there in the theater and I was cringing when that scene came on. And I even thought to myself, forget about him, forget about my mate who's come with me. Is this the film that I waited for 10 years? That was my dream movie? Is this really, what am I watching? But ultimately, I did really enjoy the film. It does get better from there, especially the second half, where it kind of narrows in on the three central characters, Buffalino, Hoffa, and Sheeran, and then two of them get bumped off, and then it's focused on Sheeran as an old man, the themes of regret and guilt and all that kind of stuff. So I did enjoy the movie. I wouldn't say it was a perfect film, and as we said, it's very different from what audiences expected, because of course, when you think Scorsese and gangster movies and all these actors, we're thinking Casino, Goodfellas, Mean Streets, that those really fast-paced, almost like they're movie trailers rather than movies, just full-length movie trailers. So yeah, I mean,
no, I mean, listen, I felt the exact same way, and I had a different movie in my head, obviously, because I thought, he was going to delve into the intricacies of my character, as opposed to how he was affecting, the actual course of events that actually transpired. I figured, how could you not emphasize the importance of Bobby Kennedy and Jimmy Hoffa, where Jim Kennedy was so obsessed with getting Hoffa behind bars, and then finally through this character of Ed Parton, who he had under his thumb, so to speak, how important that was to get Hoffa behind bars for the first time, because for many years he couldn't do it. He was unsuccessful. But because of Ed Parton wearing the wire, it was possible, and they finally achieved their objective.
Yeah, I mean,
But,
the whole thing with Hoffa's court battles, his legal troubles, them trying to get Hoffa, take Hoffa down, send him to prison, all of that stuff is probably the most neglected aspect of The Irishman, and it's just kind of blitzed through. I mean, especially your character scene, it kind of just jumps from Kennedy's death to that scene where Al Pacino is almost staring at the camera and they're basically sending him to jail. It's almost like, wait, it was supposed to be a victory for Hoffa because his enemy's gone now, but all of a sudden he's going to prison. So, I mean, they could have done a lot with that. I mean, it's one of those, because, I Heard You Paint Houses, the book, is so extensive. There's so many things covered in there. I mean, you could make a whole movie just about Sheeran's time in World War II, which probably makes up 5 minutes of the film. You could make a whole movie about Jimmy Hoffa, and you could make 3 movies about Jimmy Hoffa. I mean, they already made one in '92, I think it was, with Jack Nicholson and Danny DeVito. But it's one of those where, I mean, maybe The Irishman would have been better as a TV show, maybe a series or 10 episodes or something like that, where they could really dig deep, but they had to sacrifice things. And unfortunately for you, one of the things sacrificed seemed to be, the importance of sending Hoffa down and the man who was finally responsible for doing that. Because, I mean, I've made a video on Edward Parton years ago, which you guys can check out on YouTube. And he's a very interesting character. He's another one, you could make a film about him. There's so many interesting characters in The Irishman. Angelo Bruno, another one who, Harvey Keitel was only in the film for 5 minutes. There's so much going on in that movie where just certain things have to be sacrificed. And it's one of those where, sometimes it does make you think the things that were left in maybe could have been removed. Like, one thing I mentioned to you was that scene where De Niro is, driving around slowly, looking at the laundry place that he's planning to blow up. That kind of, for me, that kind of went on a little bit long. There's no need to have that in there for that long if you're going to sacrifice other things, because the film is 3.5 hours long, but it's still quite stripped down. I kind of feel as though a film like Casino maybe has got more information in it, with the voiceovers, with the flashbacks, the constant cutting to this character, that character. There's more of a fuller feel, if that makes sense. The Irishman is more empty, and intentionally so. I know the stripped down nature of it is intentional, and Scorsese had said it's not supposed to be a history lesson. He's not he's not there to basically tell us everything about Hoffa, and he's not really interested in whether Sheeran did really kill Hoffa. That's not the point of the movie. It's not a conspiracy theory. So most of the references to whether the mob actually took part in the killing of JFK, which we talked about a lot yesterday, he removed all references to that, aside from one, which is where Joe Pesci says if they can whack a president, they can whack a president of a union. So I understand where Scorsese is coming from. I do get it, but maybe, in an alternate universe, there's an Irishman film out there where you were one of the main characters, shall we say.
Well, listen, I just be happy with the character that propels him to go into that frame of mind that he did. Because if you think about it, what would have happened if Ed Parton didn't wear the wire? What would have happened if Bobby Kennedy was never to get Jimmy Hoffa in prison? What would be the impetus then? And because Jimmy Hoffa lost all of his control at that point, right?
Yeah.
So he, at that point, that was the catalyst that sent him into hell, right? And sent the whole thing and basically created the roadmap for his demise.
Yeah, it kickstarts the entire conflict in the film between him and the mob and Fitzsimmons and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. So and Fitzsimmons and who would have? I mean, think about the course of history now. If that character and those things didn't happen the way they happened at the time that they happened, I mean, who knows? I mean, Hoffa, would have probably remained in power, right? He probably still would have been obliging to the mob, but they wouldn't have had the situation they had with Fitzsimmons and getting all the loans as easily, maybe. I mean, who knows what the outcome? I mean, Hoffa could very well have been still alive, right, until his old age and dying of natural causes.
Yeah, you never know.
You never know.
It's crazy.
Right. So yeah, in that respect, I kind of wish that it had been the kind of movie that was in my head, and not because of ego or because self-grandizing or wanting to have a bigger role or whatever, but just to kind of explain the significance of that situation happening. He could have done it obviously a lot quicker. Didn't have to be long, drawn out, dialogue intensive scenes. It could have been done like he did in Goodfellas. I mean, he told the whole narrative, exactly. I mean, to me, that's still, I think, his best film ever. I mean, I know Raging Bull people say, but for me, being the mafia aficionado that I like, and I love mob movies as you do, I know, and everybody else who's probably tuning in. But to me, that movie was flawless. There wasn't one frame that shouldn't have been there, or went too long or went too short. Everything in that movie was perfection, in my opinion.
So how do you rank it to? How would you compare it, Goodfellas to Casino? Because it's everybody always talks about it, don't they? They always say Goodfellas and Casino. Which one is better? What do you think of the whole debate?
When I first saw it, again, I'm always comparing his mob movies or his mob themed movies with Goodfellas. So when I first saw it, I wasn't happy. But that's a movie that you watch. If you watch over and over, you catch different things that you kind of missed, because you're always, at least with me, I'm always analyzing and going, well, he could have done this better or this better. I mean, everybody has that ability, right? To 20/20 hindsight and think of what could have been done different. But the more I watched Casino, the more I really liked it for what it was, for the standalone difference between Goodfellas and Casino. It was it was a much broader canvas, so to speak. It was just, it was a whole different situation. It was a whole different point in history, and it wasn't just on one mob guy's involvement. There was so many other things going on in Casino.
Yeah, it's a very, very epic story. Everything is up, the scale, the level of the gangsters. And there's a lot more of because I actually did a video on this, and a bit of an analysis. It's quite a religious movie, because it's essentially Scorsese's version of Paradise Lost. Like Adam and Eve having everything they could have wanted, but then they eat from the one tree that they weren't supposed to. In the same way, these guys out in Vegas, they had it all, but like Joe Pesci says in the beginning, I think the line is, or maybe it's De Niro that says it, paradise, we fucked it all up, something like that. And there's the ways that the lighting is used on certain characters, like Remo Gaji. There's all this light coming down on him as if trying to say something about spirituality and all this kind of stuff. But it's interesting that there's so many undertones, there's so many different things going on in Casino. Like I said, it's a very full film. It's got so much juice to it, so much meat to it. Absolutely. No, it's a roller coaster. I mean, the last hour just goes by like that. When all the mob killings are going down, and it's that little montage. is just it's amazing cinema. Because funnily enough, while we're recording this today, I've released a video on Casino about
Nice.
Frank Vincent's character, just a little bit of an analysis on him and him turning
Right.
against Nicky. And I mentioned in that video, maybe you know more about this than I do because it was a little bit before my time, but the reception to Casino wasn't as favorable as Goodfellas, and it kind of found its name on home video release. That's when it kind of became a classic, or regarded as a classic. But a lot of people kind of say it's just Goodfellas version 2.0, where it's just an inferior version of Goodfellas. I've never understood that complaint, because that doesn't even sound like a complaint to me. That sounds like a compliment. I mean, it's better than most of the films that come out in today's day and age, in any case.
Oh, without a doubt.
Mm.
No, I mean, in Goodfellas, see, I'd heard that Goodfellas was kind of panned as well, that people were walking out. I think Irwin Winkler and Marty, they do I think there's some stuff out there that you can find where they were interviewed, and they talked about it, that it didn't test well initially, and it got panned, and it wasn't received well. And I think, like with a lot of Marty's films, you can't just watch it once and expect to get everything and to get what the movie's about, or to be able to fully enjoy it, because I think a lot of us do with his films. We're always comparing it maybe with other films he's done, or to see if there's any similarities, so you can't really enjoy it. So when you watch it a second and third time, then you can see things that you've never seen before, heard before, or realized before.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's probably because like I said, when I first saw it at the cast and crew screening in LA, I compared it too much with Goodfellas, and I was like a little disappointed. But afterwards, and I went back and saw it again, and kept watching it, and then really dissecting it and looking at it, and from a different point of view, and trying to look at it through a different lens. Then I saw it for what it was, and I thought it's a great movie. I mean, it really was. And I was humbled that I was a part of it, in some small way. But yeah, I mean, two different films, two different situations, two different, the scope and the reality and what was happening at that point in time in history.
Because it's similar to The Irishman, actually, because before it came out, so many people who were involved with it, Selma Shoemaker, Scorsese himself, and other people, they all said, it's not Goodfellas and it's not Casino. Right. Don't expect Goodfellas and don't expect Casino. And then most of the people who complained about The Irishman, their complaints were, it wasn't like Goodfellas, it wasn't like Casino. But he's trying to make a different kind of film, And even if you didn't like it, it's one of those where the intention here is different. It's not a Goodfellas retread. And I read somewhere, and I thought this was quite apt, where I can't remember what the review said, something like Goodfellas is a movie made by a young man that could not have been made by an old man, but The Irishman is a film made by an old man that could not have been made by a young man, because of the whole thing about Sheeran growing older, becoming distant with his family, that those images of him just sitting alone. Because one of the most amazing things is that The Irishman takes you through this 3-hour roller coaster of Jimmy Hoffa, his all of his tirades, his business with the mob and his fights and all that, and now he's dead. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie is near the end, where Sheeran is talking to his nurse, and he's going through all these different pictures, and he says something like, this one's Jimmy Hoffa, and she's like, right, and she doesn't know, she has no idea who it is, which is just so amazing, because it's like, okay, when Sheeran goes, that's all the story's gone. Then no one's going to know who these people are, all the things they've done. We know because we've just seen the film, so we're with Sheeran. But I just find, I agree with that review where I mentioned about being a film only an old man could make, because he's thinking of things that he wouldn't have been thinking of when he was at the age he made Goodfellas.
Well, as we get older too, Chaz, right? We all reflect. We all go back on past circumstances, instances in our lives, And I think we become, I hope we do, I know I have become a little bit more spiritually in tune, a little bit more conscious of life, of people, of human relationships, of things that we kind of, and when you're younger, you either you're not aware of, obviously, or you take for granted, or you don't think of. But as you get older and you start reflecting back on your life, I think is when you tell a different story. You see things and you can relate things differently, in that respect. And I think that's what he was going for, which obviously he succeeded at, because there are some brilliant moments. There really are, between Joe and Bob in that scene where they're, he's telling Bob, he had to put him in it, that he has to go, that Hoffa has to go. I mean, there's so many beautiful moments. That whole Frank Sheeran appreciation,
Yes,
was awesome, wasn't it?
That's my favorite scene in the whole film, from beginning to end. There's so many great moments.
Right.
You've got one scene between Pacino and De Niro, then you've got one between Pesci and De Niro, and then you've got one between Pacino. The only scene in film history between Joe Pesci and Al Pacino. And then there's a small little thing, and I actually heard Scorsese put this in on purpose because they'd never been on screen together, where Al Pacino goes and shakes Harvey Keitel's hand just to give them a little moment as well. But I mean, that scene where Russell Buffalino gives Frank Sheeran the ring, and they're just having a little quiet, tender moment together. It's almost as if the film, I mean, the movie's not meta, it's never referencing itself. It's very in the moment, but it's almost as if the film is saying, this is the last hurrah of Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro, these two guys who we've seen in so many films together. And then that scene towards the end where they're so old in the prison, and it's like these guys, these heroes, because I know you said, when you watch Taxi Driver, that had such an impact on you. These guys who are so old now. I mean, the last shot of Joe Pesci in The Irishman, and it's likely to be the last shot of Joe Pesci in any film, because I mean, I'm guessing he's gone back into retirement. It's him sick on a wheelchair going to the hospital church. It's just such a emotional image. It's quite captivating.
Absolutely, when you look at it that way, and I hope not. I hope this is not their last project together, because let me tell you, I mean, when these guys go, literally, it's going to be the last of those kind of films ever. I don't know if we have any filmmakers today that are even close to getting it as perfect and as right as they are. And to see these guys, I mean, it's my generation. You're a lot younger than I am. I mean, I'm an old guy now, but watching these guys, their films in the 70s and the 80s and continue on. And it's just, to me, if these guys stop making films and they stop working together, they can't find another project, then we're gonna be totally shortchanged in life, because these guys are unbelievable. Not, like I said, not only great artists, but they're incredible human beings, wonderful people, and we want to see them. I know your fans out there, people I know, everybody wants to see these guys continue and to make interesting projects and work together, because there's nothing more amazing. I mean, when I first saw De Niro and Pacino together in Heat, that blew me away. That scene, just to see these two guys in their prime, that that just in a tennis match together, trading dialogue back and forth, boom, 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 was amazing to me. I mean, I was like riveted, as I'm sure you were and everybody else, to see these two guys work together like that.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of, in terms of their film choices in the 2000 onwards, it was like they weren't really making those kind of films anymore. And that's one of the reasons why The Irishman was so special, as in anticipating this one last big gangster film where you've got the master at the helm, Scorsese, and he's bringing the old gang back together, his old gang, plus Al Pacino, who's never worked with before. That's why it was just such a dream movie. It was like, I was literally dreaming about this film sometimes. I was obsessed with it. not only because of the film itself, but because of what it represents. You know, it's just one last ride for these old guys, these guys who've given us so much joy on screen.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You know, I was same way when it first was announced, and I heard about it, and then obviously you hear more in the trades, and then they start talking about it on interviews. It was like, this is unbelievable. And then when they said that, I think it was Paramount or whatever the main studio was backed out of it, I'm thinking, are these guys, are they that retarded? Are they that stupid? You mean to tell me you're going to pull the plug? I don't care if the budget's 200 million, whatever. You mean to tell me you're not going to greenlight and go forward with this film? It makes no sense.
Well, I actually heard Craig, Scorsese said that Paramount dropped the film. They turned their back on it before the whole thing about the de-aging CGI. So even before they knew the budget was going to be huge, they turned it down. That to me is crazy. That kind of, it shows you the state of modern day mainstream cinema, that if Scorsese's at your door and he says, oh, I want to make a gangster film, I want to make it with Joe Pesci, who I'm going to bring out of retirement. I'm going to bring along Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, right, Harvey Keitel, along with many modern day current generation actors like Bobby Cannavale, Stephen Graham. These guys are good. They could carry films on their own. And then for you to say no, and then he shipped that to other studios. He said that everybody rejected it, which is insane. That doesn't make any sense to me. I just don't get it.
They got to be, the studios nowadays got to be run by 12-year-olds that have no concept of what this package brings to cinema. I mean, to me, it's like they're brain dead. I don't know where they're getting their ideas, what they're thinking. I mean, it makes no sense. It really doesn't.
Today, it's all about IPs and marketing, and can we make sequels from this movie? Can we make toys from it? And I mean, one thing I've heard is that, in the Hollywood New Wave and all that, or even after that, when the control was taken back out of directors' hands and back into the studios in the 90s and that, the guys who were in charge of studios, they were money men, but they were still movie men. They had a love for films, and they knew their decisions were based on, making money, being cost effective, but also for the film. Now the people in charge are just purely money men. It's just, how can we squeeze as much out of this as we can? That's why so many of the films, they're so safe. They're so, there's nothing being said. There's no identity. Right. And that's part of the reason, I think, why so many of these great actors just kind of fizzle away. It's not even the actors themselves. It's just that, if you are Al Pacino, where are you going to go? Where's the good movie roles? Do you understand what I'm saying here?
Oh, without a doubt. Absolutely. I mean, there's no reason for them to continue unless they actually need the money, and unless, God forbid, they're in a financial situation where they have to take the work, right? They have to take what's thrown at them. But there's no rhyme or reason for the quality of actor that generation, that we still have, and even some of the younger actors nowadays that want to do that quality of work. There's nothing there for them to do. So they do look towards Netflix. They do look towards Amazon. They look towards other avenues, because the main studios, Warner Brothers, Paramount, Universal, they're going towards these mindless dribble movies, that are like Scorsese had mentioned about these action films. I mean, for what they are, for that generation, that the kids, and they just want to, with low attention spans, that want to see all kinds of crazy shit going on, I guess it's okay. But if you want human emotion, and you want storytelling, and you want that relationship with somebody you're watching on screen, you say, my God, I went through this, or you're going through the whole spectrum of human emotion and feeling. You're never going to get it in these new movies. It's never going to happen. There's no character development. It's all special effects, flying around, punching, jumping off of walls, kicking people. I mean, it's ridiculous. The shit that goes on in these action movies is absolutely retarded. It's so ridiculous to me. What these characters are, they're expecting you to believe that these characters can do. Human beings jumping off of walls, flipping back, getting hit over the head, then coming back, getting hit with cars, and jumping up and fighting the bad guy. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I mean, again, with Scorsese's films, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of Goodfellas and Casino and The Irishman in a way, in that it shows you the consequence of violence. There's been an argument about violence in movies and can it have an effect on people and all that, but I would argue in some circumstances, these kind of PG-13 films, these superhero films where the guns are cool and all that kind of stuff and pew pew pew, where they don't actually show the consequence of violence, these are actually more dangerous because it puts an idea into young children's minds that guns are cool and all this kind of stuff. Imagine someone who wants to be a gangster watching Goodfellas. He'll love the first hour or 2 hours, but then when people start dying, or like in Casino, or people go to prison for who knows how long, what happens to Henry Hill, what happens to Frank Sheeran in The Irishman, that's the reality. That's right. What happens in real life. Joe Pesci getting beaten to death at the end of Casino, that's the life of a gangster. That shows you the reality. So with these new movies, they kind of show you the coolness of it, but the consequence of violence is not shown. The reality of it is not shown. So I would argue, because there's been a bit of a debate. I mean, even with, it always happens with Scorsese films. Whenever he releases a film like Gangs of New York was another one, or The Departed, because his films are so violent, relatively speaking, he gets just kind of, his films sometimes get bogged down in this debate about, is it a bad idea to show this much violence in the movies? Can it have a bad effect? Could it affect people? A bit like, could it make you into a Travis Bickle, shall we say? But I would say that it's the opposite. It's those kind of films, those superhero films, and where, people, like you say, are just jumping around, where, I mean, if you jump off a building, you're going to go splat on the floor. It's not like the Matrix where you're just going to bob up and down. But yeah, I'm going off into a tangent. I'm having a bit of a moan. So yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's good, because you hit on the point that the younger generation have become desensitized by all these these video games. Where they, I don't know, I never saw that one, but it's Grand Theft Auto or something where they're running people down, killing people. I mean, it's like senseless violence for no reason, and I think that, like you said, is more detrimental to the health of young kids and what they're seeing and what they're experiencing visually with these games and these virtual reality stuff and everything. The Travis Bickle, like you said, you can watch it, you can see the dementia, you can see the issues, the violence, you could see it, but you also see the repercussions from it. You see what transpires and what happens, the consequences. You see what they've done with the actions that they've created for themselves. But with these video games and shooting and killing randomly for no apparent reason, bloodshed everywhere, if a kid is unstable to begin with, I think it can only accentuate their issues, their mental health issues.
Yeah, because I'm not going to blame the film solely. I mean, like, say if you've got a movie or a video game that a million people play it, and then one person plays it and is influenced enough to go and do something crazy, like go into a theater and shoot people up or something, that says something about that person, not the video game or the film. Right. I'm not gonna say that just a blanket statement and say that the video games are all, because there must have been something wrong with that person initially. A bit like obviously with Travis Bickle.
Of course, but there's also social issues in life and things that can desensitize somebody, and if you already have that mental issue going on to begin with, I think it could actually push you more in that direction more than not, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know, but in what I can rationalize and try to think about, it seems to me that those kind of things, when you're exposed to it on a daily basis, and let's face it, kids don't go out and play anymore. They don't socialize. They're socializing with people across the room on their text, right? They're texting on their phone. I mean, there's no, from what I can see, and I'm getting off on a tangent, and I apologize, but I'm going to end it right here. is that they don't have the social skills to communicate or to be so in their heads. They're playing these video games 24/7. They don't go outside. They don't talk to anybody. I was walking down the street the other day, and this young man was walking towards me, and he looked at me like I had 8 heads because I said, "Hi, how are you?" He didn't even know how to respond. He was like shocked, like he didn't know how to even say, "Oh, I'm okay. How are you, sir?" or whatever. It just blew me away. Like, is he retarded? And then I thought, well, maybe he didn't hear me. Maybe he's deaf. I don't know. I mean, it just seems to me that there's no social interaction where they know how to communicate properly. I don't know. Maybe it's just my imagination, but
No,
from my experience,
I think that there is a lot in that. I mean, it's statistically proven, that a lot, being, hooked on social media has a detriment to your mental health.
right?
There's so many issues. I mean, I know people who'd people my age would rather, say you are going out, in the rare occasion that young people are going out with friends. If you're going to the house to pick them up, rather than knock on the door and somebody else opens it and you say, "Yo, can I talk to Bob," or whatever, or the person themselves answers the door, you'll sit outside and you'll text them and say, "I'm here," and then the person
Right.
comes. Like, things have changed. Like you say, a lack of social interaction and therefore a lack of social skills. I do definitely think there's something in that.
Yeah, I mean, without going off into some sociological experiment talk or whatever, I
Yeah.
think that has a lot to do with the movie going. Getting back to the film and what is accepted today as far as filmmaking and what the major studios are pulling the trigger on. But I think that age of storytelling, like we were saying, I hope these guys, Marty and Bob and Joe, I hope Joe doesn't go into retirement again. I hope, he's able to find something that, is worthy of his talent. And same with Bob and with Marty, and they continue. And Al Pacino, who's actually a very wonderful human being as well. And I hope these guys continue, because I know I will, and I know probably most of your audience will continue to be watching for their films, because when they're gone, man. I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
That generation of filmmaking, of storytelling is going to be gone.
And they've
I
still
can't.
got it as well, because that was one of the things with The Irishman. The conversations leading up to the film was, does De Niro still have it? Does Pacino still have it? Because they've been starring in so many poor films over maybe a period of 10, 15 years after the 90s. They just maybe had one or two good films here and there. People were saying maybe they're finished, maybe they don't have the chops. But then you watch The Irishman, and say what you want about the film. Maybe, you don't like it, you think it's boring, whatever, it doesn't resonate with you. What cannot be denied, and obviously there's scenes like that grocery store beatdown, but what cannot be denied is that the acting on display is incredible, especially, Frank Sheeran Appreciation Night. And then, Robert De Niro, who's kind of quiet in the film, he's in the background, he lets kind of Pacino do his thing. But in the latter stages of the film, you really see him shine. There's a scene where he phones up Jimmy Hoffa's widow, which I thought he was so incredible in that scene. When he's mumbling and there's a million different thoughts going in his head. The guilt is resonating. He looks like he's almost about to break down in that scene. The part after Bufalino tells him he's going to be killing Hoffa, and he goes onto the plane, and his facial expression is just so powerful that Scorsese actually said that wasn't supposed to be in the film, as in that long. Maybe just a couple of shots showing him going to Detroit, but they just held it on him while he was in the airplane, because I don't know if you remember, but his face is just so powerful. He says so much without even talking. And then you've got Joe Pesci again. Joe Pesci was just magnificent, and he showed a lot of people. I mean, I knew this side existed because I've seen a lot of films with Joe Pesci in him, and I knew this side existed. But when people think of Joe Pesci, sometimes, and you can see why, they think of someone screaming and shouting and swearing. They might not realize that he has a side to him, a powerful, quiet side to him which obviously was in The Irishman, and he was nominated for an Oscar, rightly so.
No, Joe is a very an incredible actor, and you know, the roles, I guess, just aren't coming for him, or whatever. The choice of roles, they're not being offered to him. But
I don't think he's interested. I think
probably.
I mean, even with The Irishman, I don't know if it was a joke or what, but De Niro said it took more than 50 attempts to get Pesci in the film because he just didn't want to do it. And, you know, it's one of those where he doesn't have anything to prove. I imagine he's not hard up. You know, what's his motivation for going back into the scene, I guess? And, you know, because he retired in the late 90s, didn't he? And he was still going strong, you know. He had. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Lethal Weapon films. I really like those. He just done Casino a couple of years earlier, and then he did in like a period of 15, 20 years, he had a cameo in De Niro's film The Good Shepherd. He was in Love Ranch, and he did, I think, a animated film voiceover, and that was it. It's just like obviously it's his own choice not to be in films, but it feels like we're kind of robbed of so many potentially classic Pesci performances. But you could argue, is it better to do that as an actor, or is it better to do what De Niro did and just star in many mediocre films? You know, films like Freelancers, and I've watched so many films of Robert De Niro's where it just feels like he's phoning it in, and the quality of the film is terrible. He's only in it because the producers want a name, and it was like, you know, I was watching these films for years, thinking I'm just like begging, you know, when is The Irishman going to be made? You know, when am I going to see these guys in one, you know, last great film? And finally, it happened in the end. So, you know, I'm happy, I guess.
Well, the thing is, unfortunately, you know, unless Bob is one of the producers or on the creative side of the script, he has nothing to do with anything other than his performance, right? So I've looked at all of his films, and I didn't, you know, some of the films I didn't like that he did, but it's up to the filmmaker and the other aspects of the creative process, the director, the lighting, you know, that's out of his hands, right? I mean, he's given his role to do, and from what I've seen in the roles he's done, it wasn't either on the page or he just couldn't improvise his way out of the bad scripted scene or whatever the case may be. But it really wasn't his fault. It's the fault of the filmmaker, of the director, of the producers, of who's pulling, you know, the creative control out of that movie. So I think, in all fairness, unless he's actually behind the camera or he's got creative input as a producer, I mean, you know, what happened with those other movies is terrible, but it's not his fault. I mean, you can't look at it like, well, you know, because he's in it, it should have been better. It was a poor choice of film, I think, or his to do, because it's out of his control. There's only so much control you can have as an actor, and even a big star. You know, I mean, you can voice your discontent with whatever, but at the end of the day, you know, who has final cut, who has the final decision on it, makes those choices, right?
But yeah, I mean, I kind of think, or I hope that we're seeing some kind of resurgence, because I mean, Robert De Niro had the Joker movie. He had a you know, medium-sized role in that, and then he had The Irishman, and he's had a few other things here and there. He's in a David O. Russell film that's coming out. Al Pacino's actually worked with Scorsese, Tarantino, and Ridley Scott in the space of a few years. He had a small role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He was in House of Gucci, which was a big film. I didn't really like the film itself, but I thought Pacino was really good in it. And De Niro is obviously working with Scorsese again, and with Leonardo DiCaprio in Killers of the Flower Moon. So it's almost like, you know, they're coming back into the light in a way, you know, at this late stage of their lives, which is nice. You know, I'm looking forward to De Niro in Killers of the Flower Moon. I don't know if you're following the movie or you know the story, but I've read the book, and he's got a really good role in that film.
Yeah, no, I have. I actually have been following that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be a tremendous project as well. Um, and I know they had script issues initially. I think with DiCaprio and the writer,
Yeah.
they had some kind of a falling out or some kind of disagreement. But
Yeah, so
I'm
they
sure.
changed the structure of the film. So initially, so obviously the story is about the 1920s in Oklahoma, Native Americans being bumped off one by one. These Native Americans who happen to have right to oil that was found there. Um, I believe the film was initially envisioned as a murder mystery with DiCaprio playing Tom White, who investigates this entire situation. And it's a true story as well, which is it's a very disturbing true story. But DiCaprio and Scorsese lobbied for a change in the structure of the film, where it's essentially now kind of dark character study, where the investigator is not the main character. The main character is, I mean, I'm trying to, because I know my audience is listening, and I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but it's almost as if the movie is told from the point of view of the bad guys, and it's their psyche. Like how do you reconcile murdering other human beings for greed, for money, and all this kind of stuff? And it's very much in the vein of classic Scorsese, because it's like, alternatively, if Taxi Driver was told from the point of view of the guy who was supposed to be elected to be the mayor or whatever it was. I don't quite recall, but obviously it's told from the disturbed person, Travis Bickle. So it's a bit like that. When I heard that news, I thought the film was a lot more. I think the film is a lot more interesting now. It's in that vein. But again, we were talking about Paramount dropping out of The Irishman. They got cold feet when that change was made, and now they're distributing the film, but they're not producing it. It's produced by another streaming platform. I think Apple are doing it now, and it's got a whopping budget. It's something like $200 million, and I've no idea where that money's going. I suppose you have any idea. I mean, I know they've got amazing sets being built. I've seen the images, but it's going to cost more than The Irishman. That's
Well,
crazy.
I have a theory about that.
Do you?
Yeah, Marty had said it once. I remember him in an interview that he couldn't understand how these movies. I think he was commenting on Waterworld or something. It was like one of the first real high-budgeted films, right? And he had said something in an interview or in a comment. I remember him saying, he says, I don't know how to make movies for that much money. He says, maybe we can make it for like 30, 40 million and then we'll whack up the rest of it. Like, as if to say, we'll tell the financiers the movie's gonna cost right 100 million. We'll actually make it for 30, and we'll split the difference amongst each other. Where it's not going up on the screen, basically. Like his films didn't require all of that excess money to be wasted. But now, I think as he's gotten older, he's figured out a way to up the ante and up the budgets, right? Somehow, to either keep him up in that stratosphere of contention with these other so-called filmmakers who have to make their films for this amount of money. I don't know, but maybe he's found a way to whack it up with his partners.
Maybe that's it.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it.
I'm really interested because I just want to see a trailer of the film or something just to give me an idea of where's this money going. Because I mean, obviously it's going to be expensive because you've got high-profile actors, you've got huge sets being built, which is expensive. But so was Gangs of New York, and $200 million is a lot of money. Even many superhero films don't cost that much. It's one of those I'm thinking, where is the money going?
Right, exactly. That's my thought exactly. I mean, where is that money going? I really, at the end of the day, would love to be in the accounting office and be part of that production team and actually know where all that money's going, because I can't foreseeably see that money is going into special effects or locations or whatever, because those things, are not really gonna matter one way or the other. And I don't think the special effects I can't even see the special effects costing what they say they cost.
Yeah, because I mean, it was similar to The Irishman when they said that it had something like a 140 mil budget. It was like, whoa, really? Why a Scorsese gangster film? But then obviously you realized why, because they were using the de-aging CGI. But here, there doesn't really seem to be a reason. You know, a more kind of wholesome suggestion I have, or maybe like a less conspiracy theory kind of version, is just that because he's working with streaming platforms who want to make a name for themselves, like, you know, Netflix and Amazon and all these lot. Sorry, it's obviously it's Apple who he's working with now for Killers of the Flower Moon. These guys will do whatever they can to make him happy. So if he says, you know what, I want a train going in the background of this scene, it's going to cost an extra 10 mil, but, you know, can we have it? And the suits will be like, yeah, sure, because they know it's Scorsese. Whereas he won't get that kind of treatment with the mainstream studio. So maybe he's just kind of making the most of it. And it's one of those where in another time, in another place, with another company, he might not have had that budget to make this film. But because, you know, it's one of those, you know, why not? You know, and it'll be interesting to see, because I've seen the images from the film, and it looks like a cool film. I mean, because Netflix got added to, Netflix, Gangs of New York got added to Netflix in the UK yesterday. And I was watching bits and pieces of it. And there's something about Scorsese period films, Scorsese movies that are set in the past, where you just kind of get lost in them, you know, especially even just the set design. The set design in his films are incredible. And the characters, and it's just like, I feel as though this is a living, breathing, real world. And if you need money to do that, you know, go to town with it. You know, if you can try and make it the best it can possibly be. But your theory, I think, I've heard other people say that. I've had subscribers say, yeah, I think, you know, it's one of those wink, wink, hush, hush, nudge, nudge situations.
Right.
So who knows, you know?
I think that has a lot of truth, because I think these guys are going, look at, you know, let's hide some money somehow. You know, let's all give us a nice payday, because we don't know when the next one, or if the next one's ever going to come about.
You should have tried. You should have tried to get in on that. You've played two Southern characters in Scorsese films. You should have just been on the phone and said, "Get me in on some of that money as well."
Yeah, well, that would have been nice. That definitely would have been nice. I haven't been feeling good in the last few years. I wasn't really feeling good when I did The Irishman, and it was kind of a struggle. I have heart issues and things like that going on, but so I haven't really been feeling good, and I wanted to get in on somehow, obviously, on Killers, and there was a part of a sheriff named Harvey Frias who I thought I would be good for, and I actually did do a self-tape and sent it, but I don't think Ellen Lewis likes me. I don't know why. I've never done anything bad or whatever, said anything to her. I've always tried to be nice, but I had submitted, like, after the initial casting, because if you remember, they had to shut down for COVID. So there was a lull there where they actually stopped production and then came back. But what happened was they had already cast everybody previously, and then when they started back up, that's when I submitted, and they said there was nothing in it for me. There was nothing left. So had I probably gone in on the initial round or gotten in touch, you know, there might have been a possibility that I could have been considered for something. But, you know, as it stood, it was already cast when I had submitted for that role. But, yeah, I would have loved to have been a part of it. But like I said, I haven't been feeling good. I haven't been 100%. And, you know, I certainly wouldn't want to jeopardize any aspect of their filmmaking if I couldn't, you know, rise to the occasion and be
jeopardize your own health, you know, because that comes before everything.
Yeah. Well, at this stage of the game, Chaz, I think I would sacrifice a little bit just to be a part of one more film. I think I try to find a way to suck it up and deliver somehow. But
you know,
yeah,
ultimately, you know, all things considered, there's a film out there that was directed by Scorsese, and it has Robert De Niro in it, Al Pacino in it, Joe Pesci in it, and it's a gangster film, and it's a great film, and you were in it, and that must really mean something to yourself.
No, it does. It really does.
Even though obviously, you know, the role of Ed Parton, it wasn't what you initially thought it was, but I mean, once that the kind of that feeling that comes about wears off. I mean, what did you think ultimately of, you know, your involvement in the film?
Well, like I said, I would have been happy. There was a line in Goodfellas where I think the guy said something about, well, he said he's in here so long he could be a stool. I mean, I would have been happy to play a stool, you know, in the movie. I would have been happy to have been an extra, just the background, just to say, look, there's me in the frame. You know, I'm with Bob, I'm with Al, I'm with whomever, whatever, in a Martin Scorsese picture. So the outcome, wasn't what I thought it was going to be. But then, you know, I was just so grateful that they considered me and that they, you know, thought enough to put me in it to begin with, and let me at least try to play, you know, best that I could at the time with these guys. So
you had the luxury of you had the luxury of sitting there and screen legend Al Pacino was coming over to you and giving food to you.
Yes, and that was so surreal. Like, the one take that he chose to use was actually my hello moment. Like when he I think that was even the first take of him coming to hand me a plate of food, and I look at him and, like, I'm not even trying to be in character. I'm just like, I'm reacting like I would to be like, oh my God, it's Al Pacino, fucking Michael Corleone, you know, handing me a plate of food. I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, it was literally like a Twilight Zone episode. And I blurted that out too. And I thought, what a stupid thing to say. But it actually felt like that for me. I mean, I was so caught in that moment, like, oh my God, it's Al Pacino and he's fucking serving me food. And that, wouldn't you know it, that was the take that Marty used when he first hands me the plate of food. I'm like, if you notice, I'm like looking at him like in awe, like, you know,
really?
and that was, you know, I wasn't even trying to be in character. I was just being Craig Vincent, you know, reacting to Al Pacino, the God,
wow.
you know.
Because, you know, the vibe that I got when you did that, in hindsight, knowing that that character is obviously, you know, with the feds, was that he's like, in his head, he's getting one over Hoffa, like, you know, thank you, Jimmy. But he's looking at him like, you know, I know things you don't know. You know, you don't know what I've got here in my pocket, a little recorder. That's the kind of vibe that I got when I saw you do that.
I love it. We'll go with that one. That's because that's what it's supposed to be, right? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, listen, hey, that's perfect. You're right.
So what you're actually saying is that in reality, you were just like, oh my God, it's Al Pacino.
Exactly. I was in complete awe of greatness, of somebody who I had idolized, you know, as well as 99.99% of every actor that's ever had a chance have been lucky enough to work on a movie or a TV show. That was the moment. That was the surreal moment. Was like, oh my God, you know, here's Craig Vincent from Endicott, New York, from a little town in upstate New York, you know, working with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese. I mean, to me, it didn't get any better than that. It just was a defining, like, life, like, aha moment that hardly many people get to experience in their lives, and I got to experience it, and that was the beauty of it, was that I did get that, and I was able to work with my idols and work with the people that I admire, off camera, on camera, you know, and that it doesn't get any better in life than that.
So yeah, I mean, we spoke about this yesterday, but obviously it didn't make the recording. But tell me about how, you know, because you're seeing guys who are playing characters who are decades younger than they actually are. You're seeing guys who are old in their 70s who even have coaches with them to make them look and act younger. But the actual de-aging is done in post-production. So was that a bit weird?
to see them. Oh, to see the young. Well, I mean, I hadn't really. I really hadn't looked at them as old men. Talking with them, working with them, and being the only time they seemed to be their age was in their movements, getting up and down, watching them move from sitting, waiting to go on camera or whatever behind the scenes. Then I did notice the age difference, but working with them, talking to them, looking at them face to face, the age thing never really came about. So when I did see the de-aging effects, it really, I mean, obviously there were some major changes and major looks that obviously made them appear much younger on the de-aging process. But no, it didn't really affect me. It didn't really affect me one way or the other, seeing them younger or seeing them older. As far as in my mind's eye,
So sticking with
the only
that,
thing
continue.
the only thing I did notice was when I did see somebody do a complete de-aging process. I don't know if you saw this. Somebody on YouTube did this with like a really very
yeah, a deep fake technology, yeah.
The software program, and it looked so much better than what the actual guys at ILM did, and I'm not putting them down or not going against, but what this guy was able to do, I thought, oh my God, for like a fraction of probably what it, obviously what it cost Scorsese.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you actually thought of the effects themselves.
Yeah, well, like I said, I thought that the aging effects that this YouTuber guy did, and I can't for the life of me think of who he is, but I'm sure if you guys Google around or whatever, you'll find it.
He actually got picked up, I think. I'm pretty sure I heard a story of him being contacted by some studio. Now he works for some special effects company.
Well, that makes sense because he was able to one-up what they had done at ILM. I don't know how he did it. Obviously, he discussed it briefly, but the guy was phenomenal.
I will say though, I mean, I'm not criticizing the guy's work, but because of the way the technology is, the deepfake technology, it's basically using pictures of the actors from a photo, from their heyday when they were younger, like Taxi Driver days, all that kind of stuff, and putting that on top. But one unfortunate, kind of byproduct of that is that what you're seeing when the actors move and everything, the facial expressions, that's not them. That's basically a picture of what they used to look like. And Scorsese has actually talked about this. I remember he said, it's almost as if he was, kind of admitting that the effects in The Irishman weren't as good as they could have been. But he was saying that there were alternative methods. One he spoke of was that, putting like the helmets on and the dots on faces. And he goes, he's not going to do any of that for these actors. You don't do that to these kind of actors. But he also kind of said that there's only so far you can go before you take away the actual performance of the actor, if that makes sense. Because what we see in The Irishman, some scenes of the aging are amazing. Some of them are, quite frankly, not so good. But it's still the actor's performance, if that makes sense. It's still him grimacing or smiling or giving a certain expression. Whereas with deepfake, because I know how the technology works, deepfake, it's just a photo plastered on the face of the person's performance. So you actually take away from the performance. So I watched it. I watched that video, and it's amazing how young he made the guys look. But the only real complaint I have is that it's just a photo essentially of De Niro, Pacino, and Pesci of when they were younger. It's not the actual performance that we're seeing now. I mean, I suppose the real kind of issue here is that in a perfect world, I think The Irishman should have been made earlier. I think a great time to have, I mean, of course, the book was only released in 2003, I think. So there's only so early you could have done it. But if they made it in 2003, maybe not. I think, okay, maybe not the scenes where, De Niro is in World War II, but I think they could have gotten away with doing the whole thing with makeup and making it look good if they had made it in the early 2000s, because obviously De Niro, he's supposed to play someone, because Jimmy Conway, there's a few scenes where he's supposed to be really young in Goodfellas. And there's a few bits and bobs throughout Scorsese's career where characters are aged up and down and with no special effects. And obviously it's not possible when they're 70 years old, but I do wonder, because I mean, like Pacino looked really, young and sharp in films like Heat, in the 90s, and then in the early 2000s, he did Insomnia, for example. I can see him with enough makeup being made to look in his 30s, if Jimmy Hoffa needed to be on his 40s and then 50s, which was his actual age at the time, I think, and 60s, etc. And same with De Niro. So, I mean, that's one kind of maybe pet peeve I have, because sometimes when you watch The Irishman, especially in the beginning, some of the effects are not so good. And it's one of those things where, maybe if it was made earlier, they wouldn't have even needed these effects.